Hi there, this is lesson 3.3, proving lines are parallel. So I was mistaken in one of our previous lessons and said proofs that there's three kinds, but we're only going to learn two. This is the third kind that I had talked about. It's called a flow proof. It's just a way of, it's just writing your proofs down and using arrows, connecting the logical statements between each other. So we're going to use certain angle pairs to decide whether two lines are parallel. So we're doing two things. We're proving lines are parallel, and we're learning a new proof called the flow proof. If I give this to you on a test, it'll just be the diagram with fill in the blanks. But you still work it the same way. So let's start with theorems. We're going to learn some new theorems to help us. So theorem 3-4 is just the converse of corresponding angles theorem. So remember, what does converse mean? So we learned what a conditional statement is. So we said a conditional statement is when you have if P, then Q. We said its converse reverses it. So if Q, then P. So that's all we're doing here. So we're taking the corresponding angles theorem and doing its converse. So instead of saying if we have a transversal that cuts through parallel lines, then corresponding angles are congruent. Here we're saying if two lines in a transversal form corresponding angles, then the lines are parallel. So we just reversed it. All right, so that's all it says. So if you got a transversal through two lines, and you've got corresponding angles 2 and 6 that are congruent, then the lines are parallel. Same thing with the converse of alternate interior angles. So we're saying now if two lines and a transversal form alternate interior angles that are congruent, and this marks alternate interior angles, and the little tick marks show that they're congruent, then the two lines are parallel. Because, see, they didn't tell us the two lines are parallel, but because of the converse of the alternate interior angle. That's all. And then we have the converse of the same side interior angle. So if two lines and a transversal form same side interior angles that are supplementary, then the lines are parallel. So they're telling you if the measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 6 equal 180, then lines L and M are parallel. And then you can prove the other theorems of the transversal and the parallel lines. Now, they could have given you this information, or they could have given you, this was 110 and this was 70. And then you can say that because they are supplementary, lines L and M are parallel. Now, here's the converse of alternate exterior angles. So it says if two lines in a transversal form alternate exterior angles that are congruent, then the two lines are parallel. So it's just reversing it. All right, so let's look at using a flow chart in problem number 1. So using a flow chart to prove theorem 3.7. Okay, so we're proving this theorem. So we want to prove that the lines are parallel. So we're given 1 and 7 are, let's go to the problem. We're given angle 1 and 7 are congruent, prove the LM. So we need to know from the diagram that 1 and 3 are vertical angles, 5 and 7 are vertical angles, and 5 and 7, 1 and 3. Then 1 and 5 are corresponding, and 3 and 7 are corresponding. So we need one pair of corresponding congruent angles congruent to prove that they're parallel. So let's start with this. So we start with the flow chart. So we start with given. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 7. It's given. Then we know angle 1 and angle 3 are congruent because vertical angles are congruent. Okay? And then together, we can use a transitive property and saying angle 3 and angle 7 are congruent because of property of congruency, transitive property of congruency. And then we can say L and M are parallel because if corresponding angles are congruent, then the lines are congruent. Because then we make 3 and 7 are congruent, they're corresponding. Okay, so it's just a matter of just writing it out and writing the arrows to connect the dots, basically. So let's look at this one. Identify which lines are parallel to angle 1. If angle 1 is congruent to angle 2, justify your answers. Well, so we're saying angle 1 and angle 2. Which lines are parallel if these two are congruent? Well, we use L and M as our parallel line and A as a transversal. 2 is not part of that group of 8 angles. If we use B, then 1 is not part of that group of angles. So we flip this and use A and B as our parallel lines, and then use line M as a transversal. So basically what we're doing is we're rewriting this to look like this. So we're using lines A and B. There's A and B. And then we're using line M. And we have 1, 8, 2, and 7. And we're saying that these are congruent. So these would be our parallel lines. So I'm going to put indicating that they're parallel. Okay, so we're indicating those two are parallel, and M is your transversal. I left off line L, so because then I can see that these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are on the same set of angles, the 8 special angles. So 1 and 2, this tick mark shows are congruent, and because if you turn it sideways, they are corresponding angles. So the question was, which lines are parallel? A and B. And that shows that 1 and 2 are corresponding angles and are congruent. So this is the converse of the corresponding angles theorem. All right, so let's look at problem 3. Determine whether the lines are parallel. Okay, so the fence at the gate is made up of pieces of wood in various directions. Suppose angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent to angle 2. Are lines R and S parallel? Explain. Well, let's see. 1 and 2. So these would be, let's see if these are parallel. That would make line T the transversal, and which make 1 and 2 alternate exterior angles. And what do we know about alternate exterior angles? They're congruent. So we're telling us that they're congruent, they're alternate exterior angles. So by the converse of the alternate exterior angle, we can say yes, lines R and S are congruent. So remember, the converse of the alternate exterior angle says if two lines are cut by a transversal and form alternate exterior angles that are congruent, then the lines are parallel. All right, so let's look at 4. Using algebra, what is the value of x for which A and B are parallel? Well, if A and B are parallel and this line is transversal, these two are going to be interior, same side interior angles, which we know that theorem says that they are supplementary. So we can do 2x plus 9 plus 111 equals 180 because the definition of supplementary angles. Then we simplify and do 2x plus 120 equals 180. Then they use subtraction property of equalities. We subtract 120 from both sides, divide each side by 2, and we get x is 30 degrees. Alrighty, so stop this video. The important thing is you're just going through the steps and you got to remember these theorems. So the only new ones that we learned were the converse of the 4 that we already learned previously. So remember, converse just flips the if P then Q, changes to if Q then P. That's all. All right, stop the video and do your problems, and we will see you in class.